Today, breaking news is reshaping the balance of power in Eastern Europe, as fresh moves by Belarus and renewed strikes by Russia are forcing the world to ask a dangerous question. Is Ukraine now facing a triple threat? The situation on the ground is changing fast, and every new development is adding pressure on Kiev, on Europe, and on global stability. In recent weeks, Belarus has taken steps that many analysts describe as more than symbolic. Military drills near the Ukrainian border, expanded cooperation with Russian forces, and sharper political language from Minsk have all raised alarms. While Belarus officially denies plans for direct involvement, its territory is once again becoming a critical launchpad in this war. Russia, meanwhile, has intensified its strikes across Ukraine. Missiles, drones, and long-range attacks are targeting infrastructure, military positions, and key cities. These strikes are not random. They appear designed to stretch Ukraine's defenses, exhaust its air defense systems, and send a message that Moscow still has escalation options. Ukraine now finds itself in a complex and dangerous position. To the east and south, Russian forces continue their pressure. To the north, the presence of Belarus adds a new layer of uncertainty, and beyond the battlefield, economic, political, and psychological pressures form a third front that Ukraine must also survive. Belarus's role in this conflict has always been controversial. In the early stages of the war, Russian troops used Belarusian territory to advance toward Kiev. Although that push failed, the precedent was set. Now, with renewed military coordination, the fear is not necessarily a full Belarusian invasion, but the constant threat that Ukraine must prepare for one. This constant threat has a real cost. Ukraine is forced to keep troops and resources near its northern border, even when the fiercest fighting is happening elsewhere. Every soldier stationed there is one less on the Eastern Front. This is exactly the kind of strategic pressure Russia benefits from. Russia's strikes have also evolved. Early in the war, attacks were often blunt and widespread. Now, they are more calculated. Energy infrastructure, transportation hubs, and logistics routes are frequent targets. The aim is to weaken Ukraine's ability to sustain both civilian life and military operations. Winter conditions make this even more dangerous. Power outages, heating shortages, and disrupted supply chains hit civilians first, but they also strain the state's ability to function. This is warfare that goes beyond the front lines, reaching deep into daily life. The idea of a triple threat goes beyond just three countries. It represents three dimensions of pressure. The first is direct military force from Russia. The second is strategic encirclement and intimidation through Belarus. The third is the ongoing economic and political war being fought through sanctions, diplomacy, and global narratives. Ukraine's leadership is acutely aware of this. Every decision must balance immediate military needs with long-term survival. Should more resources go to air defense, to ground forces, or to border security in the north? These are not abstract questions. They affect lives every day. International reactions are mixed but intense. NATO is watching Belarus closely. Any sign of direct involvement could dramatically escalate the conflict. At the same time, Western allies are weighing how much more military aid they can provide without provoking a wider war. Russia, for its part, seems to be testing limits. Each strike, each movement, and each statement is a signal. Moscow wants to know how far it can go before triggering a stronger response. Belarus plays a key role in this strategy by keeping options open. For Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, the situation is delicate. He relies heavily on Russian support, both economically and politically. At the same time, direct involvement in the war could destabilize his own country. Protests, economic pressure, and international isolation are real risks. This balancing act makes Belarus unpredictable. Even if Minsk has no immediate plan to send troops, its actions keep Ukraine and NATO guessing. Uncertainty itself becomes a weapon. On the ground in Ukraine, civilians are adapting to a reality of constant alerts and uncertainty. Air raid sirens, damaged infrastructure, and the psychological toll of prolonged war are becoming normalized, yet resilience remains strong, driven by a sense of survival and national identity. The Ukrainian military has also adapted. Improved air defenses, better coordination, and battlefield experience have reduced the impact of some Russian strikes. However, no defense is perfect, and sustained pressure can wear down even the strongest systems. Economically, Ukraine faces enormous challenges. War drains resources, scares away investment, and disrupts trade. Support from allies helps, but it is not unlimited. Russia is betting that over time, fatigue will set in among Ukraine's partners. This is where the third part of the triple threat becomes clear. Information warfare, diplomacy, and global politics matter as much as tanks and missiles. Russia pushes narratives designed to divide allies and question continued support for Ukraine. Belarus's involvement strengthens these narratives. It allows Russia to present the conflict as a broader regional standoff, rather than a unilateral invasion. This framing is aimed at confusing audiences and slowing international responses. For Europe, the stakes are high. A wider conflict involving Belarus could draw in neighboring countries and force NATO to make difficult decisions. Border security, refugee flows, and energy supplies are all at risk. Energy remains a key factor. Attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure can affect regional power grids and transit routes. Europe, already cautious after earlier disruptions, watches closely for any sign of wider instability. Despite these pressures, Ukraine continues to resist. Its strategy combines military defense with diplomatic engagement. Every visit by foreign leaders, every aid package, and every international statement matters. The question many are asking is whether Russia believes time is on its side. By keeping pressure constant and opening multiple fronts, Moscow may hope Ukraine eventually runs out of options. Belarus's positioning supports this long-term strategy. However, history shows that prolonged conflicts often produce unexpected outcomes. Societies under pressure can become more unified. International alliances can strengthen rather than weaken. These possibilities complicate any prediction. Inside Russia, the war also has costs. Sanctions, military losses, and internal dissent are not disappearing. Escalation carries risks for Moscow as well, even if those risks are downplayed publicly. Belarus, too, faces isolation. Each step closer to active involvement reduces its diplomatic space. Countries that once tried to maintain neutral relations are increasingly critical. For Ukraine, the immediate concern is survival, but the long-term goal remains sovereignty and security. Facing a triple threat does not mean inevitable defeat. It means the challenge is broader and more complex. Military planners must think in layers, defend cities from the air, hold lines on the ground, secure borders against potential new threats. At the same time, leaders must keep the economy functioning and society cohesive. The human cost remains central. Every strike affects families, workers, and children. Behind every strategic calculation are real lives disrupted or lost. Global attention sometimes shifts, but the conflict does not pause. Each day brings new developments, new risks, and new decisions. The moves by Belarus and the strikes by Russia ensure that Ukraine cannot afford complacency. Whether this truly becomes a three-front crisis depends on choices made in Minsk, Moscow, Kiev, and Western capitals. Small decisions can have massive consequences. What is clear is that the situation is entering a more dangerous phase. The lines between direct involvement, indirect pressure, and psychological warfare are blurring. Ukraine's ability to navigate this moment will shape not only its own future, but the security landscape of Europe. The world is watching, calculating, and reacting. Today, breaking news is not just a headline, it is a warning. Belarus's moves and Russia's strikes signal that the conflict is evolving, and the risk of escalation remains real. The coming weeks may determine whether the triple threat becomes a reality or remains a looming shadow over an already devastating war.